Once a respected man in the finance world, Frank, now 58, lived alone in a small apartment nestled in the heart of the city. But after the shock of a painful divorce and the sudden death of his mother, he began to lose his sense of direction. Mornings became aimless, nights drowned in alcohol, and fragmented sleep turned into a frightening routine. He had once been someone who kept everything under control, yet now, even his own mind was a mystery to him. Frank slowly withdrew from friends, cutting off contact with his daughter out of shame and self-doubt. The walls of his apartment seemed to close in tighter with each passing day, while his spirit sank into a void, one devoid of light or hope. There was a moment when he stared into the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. Lifeless eyes, disheveled gray hair, and a sorrow carved deep into his face. He no longer dreamed. He no longer tried. He no longer believed he was worthy of love. Everything felt like it had collapsed, until one autumn morning when something small sparked the first flicker of light in his soul. That morning, while cleaning out a drawer, Frank stumbled upon an old photograph. Him and his daughter on their last camping trip more than a decade ago. She was hugging his arm, smiling brightly, her eyes shining with absolute trust. His chest tightened. It had been a long time since he felt something so real. Not numbness, not detachment, but pain. A deep, aching pain that stirred a part of him he thought had long since died. That afternoon, for the first time in months, Frank stepped outside his apartment. He didn't know where he was going. He just needed to move, to feel alive again. As he passed through a nearby park, he paused. Under a canopy of fading leaves, a group of people were practicing yoga. There was no noise, no flashy outfits, just slow, graceful movements and deep, even breathing. Strangely, something in him softened. The next day, he returned to the park. This time, he sat quietly on a bench and watched the entire session. A middle-aged woman approached gently and asked, "Would you like to join us sometime?" Frank hesitated, but then he nodded. No one judged him. No one asked where he came from. There was only breath, and something unfamiliar yet comforting. The chance to begin again, even if it was just with a single deep breath. His first yoga class left his body aching. Movements that looked simple caused his shoulders to lock and his back to scream in protest. But instead of quitting, he returned the next day. And then, the day after that. Every morning he woke a little earlier, stepping out with an old yoga mat and a quiet flicker of hope in his heart. With each deep inhale and slow exhale, Frank began to hear his body again, something he had forgotten how to do for years. After one session, he sat down and scribbled a few lines in a notebook. "Today I breathed, and I'm still here." Clumsy words, but honest. They opened a small door, one where he could start having a conversation with himself. Gradually, Frank introduced short meditation sessions, just 5 minutes each morning. At first, his mind was a tangled mess. But over time, he learned not to run from emotions, but to sit with them, with the fear, with the loneliness. He also began jogging slowly around the park, just one lap each day, but each lap was a quiet rebellion against lethargy, fatigue, and despair. Each day, Frank stopped striving for perfection. He searched only for a reason to continue. And somehow, bit by bit, he began to heal, from the inside out. 3 months passed, and no one would have recognized Frank as the withdrawn, haggard man he once was. His face looked less heavy. His eyes began to reflect life again. Though still quieter than most in the yoga class, he started offering a small smile when he saw a familiar face. It was awkward at first, but then it became genuine, as if the smile had always been there, just buried beneath layers of pain. His physical health also began to return. He slept better. The chronic headaches disappeared. He lost some weight, but in a healthy way. Mornings were no longer punishment. They became sacred. Time to meditate, to journal, to sometimes jog in the morning sun. He wrote regularly, one page a day, not to publish, not for anyone to read, but simply so he could better understand himself. The most miraculous moment came one afternoon when he gathered the courage to call his daughter. She answered, paused in silence for a few seconds, and then burst into tears. They spoke for nearly an hour, not just as father and daughter, but as two people learning how to forgive, how to start over. Though no longer young, Frank was finally living the first days that truly felt like his own. Not perfect, but peaceful. And he came to understand something essential. Healing doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means learning how to live with it, gently. The day Frank stepped into that park with an old yoga mat and a wounded heart, he had no idea it would be the day his life began again. He didn't need grand gestures to change. Just one deep breath, one nod to a kind invitation, and one first step out of the darkness. Frank's healing journey wasn't loud. It happened quietly in the stillness of early mornings, in the lines he wrote to himself, in the beat of his heart during meditation, and in those small, simple moments he found someone he thought he had lost, himself. Today, Frank no longer talks about success or failure. He talks about presence, about living fully in each moment. He doesn't try to outrun the past anymore. He sits beside it, like an old companion who once hurt him deeply, but who also shaped who he is. His story isn't one of a remarkable man. It's the story of anyone who's ever been lost. And if there's one thing Frank wishes to say, it's this. It's never too late to begin again. No one is undeserving of peace. And as long as you're still breathing, there is still hope.